Movement of people from one place to another. It happens for a variety of reasons. This can be economic, social, political, or environmental. A migrant is someone who chose to move. They can move for several reasons, including family members living in other countries, economic reasons, job opportunities, or education. Some of them might return to their original countries after a while, and the majority of times the decision was made with time, planning every detail and bringing with them their belongings. People move from one country to another because they are seeking for better economic opportunities. Normally, this migration happens from people from developing countries to developed countries. Some people are forced to migrate because of the war and violence the country they are living in is suffering. They have no choice and are unable to go back due to the lack of security and because they might feel persecuted.
People forced to migrate from home as long-term changes or sudden changes affect their environment and well-being. This might include natural disasters or climate change.
Refugee is someone who had no option and was forced to move. They were escaping from violence and conflicts. They lived seeking for protection and security. The majority of times, they have to live without their belongings and without even knowing where they are going.
Host countries are the countries which receive the migrants and refugees, whereas home countries are their countries of origin.
Which countries produce the biggest amount of migrants?
And what about refugees?
The Venezuelan crisis is the biggest migratory crisis on Latin America nowadays. This was caused by the political and economic crisis that the country is going through since Hugo Chávez's last presidential period. The UN Refugee Agency, there are about 650,000 asylum seekers and 4.5 million migrants and refugees all over the globe. The exodus of Venezuelans is mainly to neighboring countries such as Colombia, Peru, Chile, USA, among others. The Syrian civil war has been the biggest refugee generator of our times. Over the past 8 years, according to the UN Refugee Agency, about 6.2 million people have been displaced within Syria and about 5.7 million people are Syrian refugees. The specific conflict is highly controversial due to the fact that it gathers a high quantity of actors. It started as a protest against its President Assad and later turned into a civil war. This due to the apparition of rebel groups, the formation of ISIS, and the constant fights between the government and the opposition. This conflict has rapidly escalated and has now joined countries such as Russia, China, the US, as well as NGOs around the world.
Can affect the accomplishment of the SDGs in host countries. This is due to the high cost involved in migration, poor conditions in host countries, and barriers to mobility.
12 of the 15 top refugee hosting countries are themselves considered fragile, and 13 of the 15 are low and middle income countries.
Displacement increases poverty, as people are forced to leave behind their assets and gradually sell what they have to flee and avoid conflict to survive in host countries. Levels of poverty for displaced people are significantly higher compared to levels in their host countries to conflict. For example, more than 2/3 of the Syrian refugees live in poverty. For those able to flee to other countries, access to education can be highly problematic. Not only are local schools already overstretched, but refugees are often denied access to services or systems. For instance, 70% of the Syrian refugee children had informal education in
Most refugees face challenges in accessing labor markets, meaning poverty intensifies. Although 17 of the world's top 20 refugees hosting countries allow refugees to work, in practice, refugees are often excluded from formal employment.
International labor migration is a powerful poverty reduction tool. In the host countries, job vacancies can be filled and economic growth can be sustained. After an earthquake devastated Haiti in 2010, the U.S. Department of State made Haitians eligible for temporary work visas. Haitian workers went to the U.S. farms in need of agricultural labor. Haitian economy adding $3,300 to Haiti's GDP. Their work also adds value to the U.S. economy by filling seasonal workforce needs. One worker month of Haitian agricultural labor adds $4,000 to U.S.
Our report mindset of the 43 countries that presented their progress towards the SDGs to the UN in 2017, just 25 mentioned refugees or migrants as the left behind group. Intergovernmental organization in the field of migration. It works to help ensure an orderly and humane management of migration for the benefit of all. Promote international cooperation on migration issues, of practical solutions to migration problems, and provide humanitarian assistance to migrants in need, including refugees and internally displaced people. Its purpose is to coordinate the global emergency response to save lives and protect people in humanitarian crises. It seeks to build peace through international cooperation in education, sciences, and culture. Its programs contribute to achievements of Sustainable Development Goals. UNESCO develops educational tools to help people. It works so that each child and citizen has access to quality education. Works in over 190 countries and territories to save children's lives, to defend their rights, and to help them fulfill their potential, from early childhood through adolescence. Its purpose is to reach every children and families in emergency with life-saving aid and long-term assistance.
In conclusion, the effect migration has in host countries and its migrants depends on how vulnerable and prepared those countries are to receive a mass flow of foreigners. For this reason, countries that are vulnerable are not able to offer specific support to migrants and often face economic, social, and political problems. And migrants and refugees will deal with extreme poverty challenges. Also, many countries, as we mentioned it before, don't report migrants as a population at risk that is being left behind in SDG outcomes.
According to international relations, in a world increasingly shaped by climate change, poverty, and conflict, the SDGs cannot be achieved without taking into account the rights and needs of refugees, internally displaced and stateless people. For this reason, it is important that governments and NGOs build commitments for the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development to leave no one behind.